Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Trisha and today on the Aspiring Home Cook, I'm going to share with you one of my favorite breakfast recipes. As soon as it gets cooler, at least over the weekend when we have a little more time, we tend to get drawn towards breakfasts like the hearty Indian paratha, either plain or stuffed. And today I'm going to share with you my recipe for a cauliflower stuffed paratha or a gobi paratha. This recipe can be a little finicky, but I'm going to share with you a few tips and tricks that I know will help you get the best results. Now, before we get started with today's recipe, if you're new here and you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing to my channel. And once you do, click on the little bell icon so that you get notified every time I upload a new video. So let's head on over to the kitchen counter and get started with today's cauliflower parathas. Over here, I have 2 cups of whole wheat flour. This is stone ground whole wheat flour that you can typically find at any Indian grocery stores. Some of our mainstream supermarkets like Coles and Woolworths also carry this now. Add a little salt to taste. I've put in about 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt and I'm just going to mix that all together. Then, making a little well in the center, I'm going to pour in a little water at room temperature. I'm going to add the water gradually and knead this flour into a nice, soft, pliable dough. Once it has all come together nicely and you're left with a beautiful soft and pliable dough, we're going to leave this to rest for a little while. I would recommend leaving the dough to rest for at least 10 minutes so that the gluten relaxes and it's easier to roll out your chapatis. So I'm just going to cover that with a clean kitchen towel and set it aside for 10 minutes. While the dough is resting, we're going to get on and make our cauliflower filling. Now, the first tip while making your filling is do not make this in advance. Make your filling just when you're ready to get started stuffing and rolling out the parathas, because otherwise it's going to let out a lot of moisture. Tip number 2, if possible, use a little food processor like I have over here. I personally find that this way the cauliflower does not release too much of moisture. If you don't have a food processor, you can also use a box grater and grate your cauliflower down. Tip number 3, try and have the cauliflower sit in your refrigerator for a few days. I find that this drops the moisture content, which while making a stuffed paratha is extremely helpful. I've got about half a small head of cauliflower here that I'm quickly going to blitz. And in a matter of a few seconds, I've got a nice, almost fine chop on my cauliflower florets, like you can see here. I'm going to tip all of this out into a bowl. And to it, I'm going to add a little grated ginger. I've got about a 1/2 inch piece of ginger over here that I'm going to finely grate into my cauliflower. And next, we're going to add in some fresh chilies. I'm using 2 Thai bird's eye chilies that are pretty hot. You can adjust the amount of chilies to suit your preferences. Chop these up nice and fine and tip them into your cauliflower mix. Add a little salt to taste. And next, a teaspoon of ajwan or ajwain. This you can easily find at any Indian grocery stores. In English, it's called bishop's weed or carom seeds. A lot of your mainstream supermarkets also carry this now. Lightly rub them between the palms of your hands to release the natural oils and add them to your mix. And I'm also going to add a touch of turmeric powder. Just a little bit, you don't need too much of it. And lightly but thoroughly mix everything together. You don't want to overmix this because that will result in your cauliflower releasing a lot of moisture. And I almost forgot, I'm going to add a tiny bit of amchur powder. I'd say about 1/2 teaspoon. You can add this to taste. Amchur is dried mango powder and it adds a little bit of a zing to your filling. If you don't have amchur powder, chaat masala also works really well. Another light, gentle mix and we're ready to start rolling our parathas. Most households have a traditional tawa to fry off their chapatis and parathas. I don't, so I'm just using my trusty old cast iron pan and I've got this preheating on a medium heat. I've also prepped a little bit of oil that I'm going to smear all over the parathas once they're almost cooked. This is optional, you can leave it out if you want to cut down on the amount of oil you consume. We're going to start off by portioning our dough. It should have rested and you will notice instantly that it turns nice and soft while that gluten relaxes. Out of this portion, which was 2 cups of whole wheat flour, I make about 8 portions or 8 parathas. This of course is up to you. You can decide how large or how small you'd like your parathas to be. Roll each of these portions to smoothen out most of the cracks and creases that you find. We're going to work with one portion at a time and keep the rest of them covered so that they don't dry out. We're going to start off by lightly flouring our work surface. Flatten one portion of the dough and dip that in a little bit of your dry flour. This is the same whole wheat flour that we used to knead the dough. And I'm going to roll this into a little disc. That's how large I'm going to roll it out. It's about, I'd say about 5 inches in diameter. You don't really need a ruler to measure. It should be about the size of your palm, like you can see here. Into this, I'm going to put in a couple of spoons of that cauliflower filling. Don't skimp on the filling, be nice and generous. I find that when the parathas are stuffed well, it's actually easier to roll them out. Carefully bring the edges together and seal that little parcel off. Bring both ends together like you can see me do here. If there's any excess flour, just break that off. You can add that into your next paratha. I'm going to seal any cracks by pinching them together, just like you can see me do here, and gently reform that into a little bit of a flattened disc. You're going to flour this off. Make sure there's a little flour on your work surface as well. And the side that has all those creases is going to be away from you. The top surface is going to be a nice clean surface to work with. And very gently, you're going to roll these out into a larger disc. Remember, these won't be as thin as your regular chapatis or plain parathas, simply because it's stuffed with all that vegetable goodness in there. But slowly and carefully roll them out. If you find for whatever reason that your stuffing is releasing a lot of moisture, you can sprinkle a little dry flour into that mix just to absorb the excess moisture and continue filling and rolling your parathas out. Make sure you turn them around every once in a while so that it doesn't stick to the surface, and flour your work surface as needed. Once that's done, dust off any excess flour. Like you can see here, it is a little on the thicker side from my usual chapatis, but that's perfectly fine because this is a stuffed paratha. We're going to take this over to the cooktop and start cooking them off immediately. My pan has heated really well and I'm gently going to place that paratha on the pan. And today I've got a little bit of a special appearance by my husband. We've got a bit of a tag team setup. I roll the parathas and he fries them off. It really helps because it goes a lot faster. And you're going to let your paratha cook off for a little while until it cooks off on one side and develops a few light brown spots. Once you've done a couple of these, you'll know exactly when to flip them over. Like you can see here, that side has cooked off for the most part, and there's a little bit of a smattering of light brown spots and speckles. Gently press down the edges to make sure that the edges cook well. You don't want to apply too much pressure here. And you're going to let the parathas cook off on the second side as well. Smear this with a little bit of oil if you're using it. Some people like to use ghee over here. I'm using oil just to keep this 100% plant-based. You can use whatever suits your dietary requirements. Flip them over and like you can see, we've got that same effect going on the second side. A tiny bit more oil goes on this side as well. Remember, you've got your pan on a medium heat all through, and once you've got a beautiful browning going on like you can see here, you know your paratha is fully cooked. You will also notice that the parathas tend to puff up a little bit in spots, and that's completely normal. In fact, that's what I like to see in a paratha. But if that doesn't happen, don't worry about it. That's usually because the filling has kind of poked through your dough while rolling it. Keep flipping your paratha until you get this beautiful smattering of brown spots all over. That's how you know your paratha has cooked through. Set this aside. and you're ready to serve that paratha. These parathas are best eaten nice and hot. In a similar fashion, go on and roll, fill, and cook off the rest of your parathas. And once they're all done, here's what you're going to end up with: a plate of the most beautiful, flavorful parathas. Ideally, in India, when you go to a dhaba and enjoy these parathas nice and hot, they're served up with some yogurt and a mixed Indian pickle or a spicy Indian pickle. But since we're having this for breakfast, I find that the pickle and yogurt combination is a little too savory for me. I like mine smeared with a little bit of butter. I'm using a plant-based butter here. And you're ready to dig into these. I simply have to break into one and show you what the inside looks like. While the dough has cooked off beautifully, inside you find a nice little pocket of that gorgeous stuffing. I'm going to go sit down and enjoy my parathas now. And I really hope you have an opportunity to try this recipe out soon. So guys, that was my recipe for the ever so popular gobi paratha or cauliflower stuffed paratha. I hope you enjoyed today's recipe. If you did, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and share it with family and friends that you think might enjoy it too. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'll see you really soon with another delicious recipe. So till then, take care. Bye.